at CTRMRadio. Today we talk about AI again, but specifically we talk about concerns around AI which we see in the industry. This concerns threat to slow down technology advances in the industry, but I believe that software vendors know how to address most of these concerns, and that's exactly what we want to discuss today. I will discuss it with a panel of experts, and I will ask the panel to introduce themselves first of all. So let's start, as I see you on the screen, with Marc, please.
Sure. Hi, my name is Marc Lefebrve, and I'm the CTO of ClearOpx. We've recently rebranded and are now predominantly focused on operational automation for back office through the use of agentic AI. I've been in the commodities industry for over 20 years, and my expertise is really around back office automation. So this was really in line with what I've done throughout my entire career. So really happy to be here today and participating on this panel.
Thank you. David, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Gross. I am a product manager at Ion Group, specializing in our OpenLink products. So like Marc, about 20 years in eCTRM software, kind of. So lots of experience around different industries, different parts of our products from front to back. And I'm also leading a number of our AI initiatives here at Ion Group.
Thank you, David. And Alexander?
Yeah, hi, everyone. I can't believe it, but it's been actually almost 20 years for myself as well, partly on the operational side within trading firms, and then also on the software side. So I'm the COO with RadarRadar, and our mission is really to help companies dealing with commodities to get one economic reality of their exposures. And we do that through heavy emphasis on data management, on business logic, and a nice reporting interface as well for that. So happy to be here today and address some of the concerns you were raising in your opening.
Thank you. So I will put now some sand behind the topic. So 1 year ago, Comtech has published a report on AI in commodity and energy industries. And in that time, software vendors were already using AI for internal purposes, for example, for coding, for some informational services within companies, also for training purposes. But the use of AI in standard software solutions were in the very early stage, I would say. Now, when I look what software vendors are offering to the market, it's really great progress. So there are very advanced, productive, ready tools for post-trade automation, for market intelligence, for reporting in natural language, and so similar applications. But if we look at the commodity and energy industry, we don't see such progress. So I would say they are exactly the same place as they were 1 year ago. So there are some interest, some excitement. There are pilot projects testing, mostly using internal skills, internal employees, trying to put something in-house, not that much looking into the market for already standard software, and basically expressing even more and more concerns around AI. So what are those concerns? There are few surveys which were done by commodities people, even by Financial Times, by other consultancies. And if you look at the results, then you see that there are top 3 or 4 concerns which very frequently come on the top of those responses. One of those concerns related to data. It's not only data quality, it's also data security. It is concerned around sensitive company data used for AI training, sensitive company data coming out of secure environment, And this is always one of the top three concerns expressed by the industry. And so I would like to start with discussion around that. So we have three different companies here. All the three are dealing with data. I will ask my question first of all to Alexander, as RadarRadar is the data management professional. So what can be done to address these concerns?
Thank you for the question, Irina. First of all, I think we're all very excited about the opportunities that AI technology is providing us. So excited that I think the expectations are very high as well. And those expectations are leading also to pressure to bring this technology to market also very fast. So we're basically in a certain arms race at the moment. Before I dig further into that, I'd like to draw maybe some parallels, because the concerns you raised, I think, are not new. They've been par for course for years. I think if you could draw some parallels with the use of Excel over the last 20 odd years as being one of the most prevalent business tools out there, you can draw a distinction between the use of Excel at a desk level and a more kind of an enterprise approach. Organizations have basically been drawing a blind eye to that use over the years. And there's been a lot of leakage around that. And I think if you then layer in the role of vendors such as ourselves and the others on this panel, this has been our bread and butter to basically deal with these topics, deal with these concerns, especially the ones that work with large enterprises that are ISO and SOC compliant. This is our reputation and everything. We need to work through that. Now take this back to AI and again, this speed to market. Also there you find an approach that is more on an enterprise level and at a desk level. Everyone now thinks they're being equipped to use this technology, but that's where the concerns are, that as with Excel, they also apply this in all different shapes and forms on a desk level without any of the kind of governance controls that we as vendors have already been applying for years. If you then look at how we vendors on an enterprise level, it's more integrated. If we look at what we're launching later this year, security, also user access, what happens with the data, all those things are top of mind as we do this integration and this development. There's one thing that we can't control for, and which we debate extensively, is the role of the user in this respect. The user will drive these bots, drive the AI. They need to be, careful on how to interpret the outcomes here, and some of that will be reliant on the underlying data structure. Again, that's where we put a lot of emphasis to make sure that that is trusted, that there's a strong governance in place. But the user, needs to apply some human intelligence and actually not be on autopilot, but really interpret properly the outcomes here. So I think vendors are well positioned to address these concerns. I think the market should recognize that you can't let this be a free-for-all like they've been doing with Excel for years. And that's where I think you see the repositioning. You mentioned, though, in your introduction about that the use of AI has not been that prevalent, but I think we are reaching a tipping point. We see also ClearOpx and their repositioning. Barchart's been launching their AI bot. We're coming out in Q3 also with features in-house already. It's been applied a lot. So this year we are definitely reaching a tipping point, but we're being cautious with our speed to market, again, to really make sure that these concerns are well addressed.
Thank you. And now, Marc, what do you want to add?
Yeah, so this is definitely one of the biggest concerns from all of our customers around data security, data protection? What's the data quality? And as Alexander mentioned, it's not a new problem. This is problem's been around for decades. As systems are opening up, and I would say systems are opening up more and more for AI. AI is very data intensive. Security is becoming, really, really a prominent problem, because as you're opening your systems up and making it available to AI, the data is now journeying outside of these systems. And a lot of these legacy systems have their own internal access controls. And once you bring the data out, all of those controls are gone. So one of the first things that companies need to do is define a policy on which AI products or software or tools that can be used within their organization. And each one of those tools has to go through a vetting process. You have to understand if there's any third-party services that those underlying tools may be utilizing to make sure that your data is not being compromised. And that's another question we get a lot is where's my data going? What are you doing with my data once it runs through your AI, your large language models? ClearOpx doesn't build our own large language models. We use third-party models, but we ensure that the data is not being trained on or being stored outside of our environment. So the policies is really key. Implementing your governance and your permissioning so that if a user asks a question and they're not getting answers of data that they don't have access to. So if, a lot of data within an internal organization is very sensitive. So that has to be thought through as part of the governance and architecture of any AI platform. Protections really can be demonstrated through traceability and auditability. So knowing where the data is coming from, what underlying data sources is providing those results is also paramount to know that your data is sort of being processed in an accurate, secure manner. So again, it's not a new problem, but it's becoming more pervasive just with the new way of accessing it through AI.
Yeah, more severe. David, do you want to add something?
I think both Marc and Alexander, right? They hit on the key points that I would say, we echo as well. I was mentioning I just came from a user conference that we just hosted with a large number of our users, and these are the same concerns that are going to be brought up throughout anyone within our industry using our softwares, right? I think the one that stands out for me, when we think about this, we think about a spectrum of data sensitivity, right? Things that are less sensitive potentially and more sensitive. And depending on the sensitivity of that data and what our clients want to do with it, the solutions that we're working on, right, those are tailored to allow them to use for things that have low data sensitivity, right? So maybe it's something like natural language query or reporting, where we don't necessarily even need to access their data. Those things can be done potentially with some of the tools that are out there, either internal local LLMs or with commercial LLMs with the right type of data retention policies in place. I think those are pretty important. And then on the other side of data sensitivity, if you're getting into key data, that's the secret sauce, right, for our clients. Those are things where we might want to make our data AI accessible for our clients to use their own AIs in those cases, because that way they can, put in place whatever governance they want from a data sensitivity perspective.
Thank you.
Maybe Irina, I know we're going on to the next question, but to add to what David's saying, I think that's another example where vendors have so much more experience dealing with data categorization coming from dealing with HIPAA or personal data, categories A, GDPR, etc. So that's where you can rely more on the vendors to solve for these things in a proper way, and rely on existing frameworks than starting this from scratch.
Yeah, thank you. I fully agree with you. And the next one we want to discuss is trustability of AI output. I mean, AI is not deterministic. Everybody's saying, well, if you ask your question in a bit different form, you may get different answer. And even worse, there are so-called hallucinations when the answers are just wrong. And this, for example, was the #1 concern in a survey which Financial Times performed some weeks ago. So how to deal with that? What are the ideas to reduce hallucination and build the trust in AI output? And now I start with Marc, please.
Yeah. So this has been definitely, I'll say, a journey for the ClearOpx team in dealing with hallucination. Why I send the same request into the model and I get a different answer every time is sometimes a little perplexing. But oftentimes we're being asked to perform requests on proprietary data. So in those instances, the AI's general knowledge is not going to be able to answer the question. So if you're asking a question that pertains to, let's say a company's, internal naming conventions, for example, on, trades or trade confirmations, oftentimes the model is going to have no idea. So the techniques that we've incorporated is making the internal data AI ready. We like to say it's making the data available to the AI. And we incorporate a variety of techniques through either annotated ground truth, providing examples of similar requests and their responses. We also have retrieval augmented generation on certain reference data that the LLM can cross-reference values as they're coming back. We've had good success in both of these approaches and the RAG-based approach. But some of the more advanced techniques that we're now exploring are having multi-agent validation. So I'll send an initial request in. I'll have the LLM perform an initial response, and then I'll have a separate agent evaluate that response against the original request and sort of come to a consensus as to what the answer may be. So kind of pitting the LLM against itself, we found also another good technique to circumvent hallucinations. And for a lot of the use cases that the ClearOpx team does, we do a lot of transactional processing, so it's either right or it's wrong, and we can really gauge our accuracy pretty closely on how well the LLM is performing. We do a lot of back testing of our prompts as well to circumvent any hallucinations. But coming up with those metrics that we can measure really helps us to hone in on the best techniques. So those are the techniques that we've used, and we've been successful. We've had some prompts reliably running upwards of 95% accuracy, even on data it hasn't seen prior. So this is something we're constantly monitoring.
Okay, thank you, David.
So I think Marc touched on some great points there, actually. Maybe just to add a couple of things that we tend to think about here. Putting AI in the right places is really important. Marc talked about questions that are deterministic in nature, right? So if you're doing a calculation or you're doing math, AI isn't, we don't view AI as the right tool for that, at least not yet. Maybe eventually.
Yeah.
But
I think a general concern, general agreement in the industry is, first of all, it's automation, it's reporting, it's information management, but not analytics.
Right, and I think that's the key, right? So things like analytics, we don't use AI for because we view that as, okay, math is great, coding is great for math. You can even, if you want, use your AI to help you write the code that's going to do the math, but you need a deterministic answer. And I think that was a really important point that Marc made and something that we think quite a lot about. As far as hallucinations in general and sort of the accuracy of some of the productized things that we're working on, we see a couple of things. So first of all, in general, there's a trend where as the models have been improving over the last year, we see the accuracy going up just without really even doing anything. So my expectation is that that trend will continue and that the things will get better. I think the other part that has become very important to us is it's been another way to focus a lens on where we need to improve the knowledge sources that we're putting into these LLMs, right? So Marc mentioned, okay, you have general knowledge, but the specific knowledge, right, that we're putting in as well, right? So think of things like help files or documentation for our software and things like that. Those are things where it's very important to have good quality, right? We always had, again, I think we've talked about this a couple of times. This is nothing new, right? You put bad quality documentation in or outdated documentation in, you might not get the right answers. And I think in most of the cases where we find hallucinations, it's because if we investigate underneath the covers, the documentation that we put in might need to be updated and improved. So it's another way for us to focus a lens on how do we improve some of the quality of that documentation. And I think that's been something that's been an interesting thing for us to see as well.
But documentation can also be improved with the help of AI.
Absolutely. And it's another way we're using it internally. Absolutely. Right. These are great ways to scrub through things. You think of just examples like, all of us have different versions of our software. You want the right answer for that particular version that user has in front of them that they're using, right? Because so that it's very much tailored to the experience that they're having. But yeah, using AI to do this, I mean, I think that's been one of the most interesting and fun things that we've done so far.
Alexander, anything to add from your side?
Yeah, so at the introduction, we also mentioned how we've been in this industry for 20 years, right? We've had the opportunity to learn a lot in those 20 years. I think that learning aspect and the training aspect of these models is important. So I'm concerned with the pressure for speed to market to suddenly apply this technology in all different areas. I think we've narrowed down in this conversation that actually there are particular areas where it can be very suitable, but not everywhere. Mm-hmm. Maybe over time, but it needs more training, it needs more learning, it needs more contextual knowledge to deal with that. And to give you an example, very early on in our own models, we would ask it, okay, how do I reduce my risk? And it would look at the larger positions and maybe look at the futures book, and it would say, well, reduce this futures position by X. But then actually you're lifting your hedges and you're taking on more risk in that sense. So it needs to have time to be trained, to get smarter, so that the outcomes are more reliable. And the thing I keep saying, nothing, human intelligence is still leading here. Just be smart, interpret the outcomes, and don't be on autopilot.
Thank you. Okay, and there is another concern which somehow related to this, and I will ask you to give a bit short answers now, because it's somehow overlapping. That's a black box. So people don't have a feeling they understand how AI comes to these responses they give. So do you have any comment on how to deal with black box? And I will start with David this time.
All right, thanks. Yeah, it's a big concern, right? It's a big concern for us when we're using this for internal uses also, right? But when we think about it in the product context, there's a couple of things and principles that we've put in place and that we think about doing. So first of all, I think in general, the tools in the LLMs are getting better at explaining their reasoning. And that is something that we have looked to as part of the types of things that we're putting into our products to expose that to users, right? So that you always have the option to see how is the agent arriving at the answer that it's providing, right? So if you think about it in the case of something like documentation, right? I ask a general help query, maybe I get back some information. I could just get back a summary that tells me do step 1, 2, and 3, or I could get back something that says, okay, here's why these are the documents that I looked at, and I can point you to something where you can go and validate that information yourself. So I think incorporating that visibility into how we arrive at those things for things that are embedded in the application, and then for the types of things where we're making things more AI ready or AI accessible, right? Then that's up to you, right, to bring your own AI and think about, how do you want to expose that to the users?
Thank you. So, who else want to add something, Alexander?
Yeah, so black box, you can draw some parallels here with also model risk, which in the finance and insurance industries and risk management is a well-known concern out there, challenge, but also having methodologies how to deal with this. I think a lot of emphasis, if I take an example also with our value at risk models, requires a lot of testing and a lot of scrutiny of the data going in. And Marc mentioned it already, but prepping that data is very, very important here. So the governance around that, and then testing your outcome over and over and over again. So a lot of back testing. The model itself, it's hard to completely open that up, but know the inputs, understand the outputs, and keep repeating that process over and over. And again, also look at how parallels in other industries, in the insurance and finance industries, how they have been dealing with such risks already over time.
And if you look at the post-trade automation, operational automation, Marc, probably here you have less black box concerns, do you?
No, I think the points that both David and Alexander made are highly relevant. The reasoning behind the answer is always incredibly important to know whether the outcome is accurate. We've incorporated a process where we have evidence-based output. So not only do we have the reasoning that the LLM gave behind its answer, but also the citations of the evidence upon which it was derived. And oftentimes, if the answer is not correct, we have a human in the loop that's going to evaluate the reasoning. It's going to look at the citations, and then it may actually make adjustments. And this is where the continuous learning comes into play. So a lot of times, yeah, it's a black box, but you want to try and open it up as much as possible and gain insight into how it derived the answer, and then try and make a correction if it wasn't correct, if it wasn't right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. As we are coming to the end of our conversation, maybe I would ask each of you to give some closing remarks at this point in time. And I don't know who wants to go first. Marc, you are here.
Sure. So I think, from my personal experience, I think this AI has been invigorating from a career perspective, from a personal perspective. I keep telling everyone I've been solving the same problems for 20 years, with different technologies. And the problems are still there. They're not going away. Even AI is not going to solve processing, for example, your trade confirmations or doing trade capture after trades are executed. But now we're doing it in, I'd say, a much more scalable, a much more automated way. We're doing stuff today that I've never dreamed of doing, maybe even a year or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited with the prospect of AI, but with that comes incredible responsibility. Especially, all the concerns that we brought up today are real concerns. They need to be addressed, and I think it's going to be a fun journey for the years ahead.
Thank you, David.
Sure. maybe I'll go in a slightly different direction. I think what Marc said is absolutely true about the excitement and the potential here, right? Especially for automation. But I think in talking to a lot of the clients that I work with, it's interesting, where their concerns are. We talked a lot about the concerns from a security perspective. I think there's a lot of concerns, especially if you talk to people who are in traditional IT roles about, what does this mean for the future of their organizations, right? And the people who are doing these types of tasks. And I think it's too early to tell, right, how some of that develops. And we didn't get into that here today. But that's another important concern for people. We talked about human in the loop. I read an article recently, right, that talked about the amount of code that's being generated by AI requires the same amount of people to review it as it does to write it in some cases. So I think we've yet to see what will happen there, but just an enormous amount of promise, an enormous amount of excitement around this, at every level for every type of use case that you could put in. And I think we've only begun to see, what some of the things that we'll be able to do with this technology.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that there are a lot more concerns than those which we managed to discuss today. So we will continue this discussion in the future.
Yeah.
So, Alexander, your final statement.
I'd echo what David and Marcus also said. Super excited, but I'd caution for some patience in bringing this, applying this in an enterprise context. Right, that's just going to take more time, but there's a lot of experiences that software vendors already have in dealing with these concerns. Rely on them to do this in a proper way, but that will require a bit of patience of those executives out there that think suddenly they can just turn on the faucet and everything's solved and productivity will go up. It'll come, but give it some time. Do it properly.
Thank you very much, and thank all of you for this interesting discussion. And now we are closing them. Thank you very much for watching this podcast. Please like and share it. That will help us. Thank you.